Hi there, Monica Humple, a Master Certified Coach here, and this is another video in my series specifically to be shared with our wayward spouses. So in this video, I want to talk about why it's important to be transparent. And by transparent, I mean things like sharing your location, giving access to your phone and your other devices, passwords, ways to get into social media, things like that. I want to just go ahead and say what I know many wayward spouse thinks when we talk about this transparency. You feel like your spouse is being controlling. Yeah, I know. My spouse thought that too. And actually that was one of his beefs with me prior to the affair, was he thought I was very controlling. And I know it feels like your spouse is trying to control you, but let me try to help you understand again what's happening on your spouse's side, your betrayed spouse. So as a person who's experienced affair recovery, I was scared to death and I did not feel safe. And here my spouse was telling me he wanted me to stay in the marriage. He wanted me to try to work it and make it work and stay. And I'm sitting here in a constant state of fear because he connected with this person. They were emailing each other and she lived in another state. They were texting. He was using apps to text and he was emailing, and they were contacting each other through like social media and things of that nature. So that being the case, obviously his phone was a huge trigger for me. What was he doing? Well, because he hid this from me so well, I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust him. So think about it from the perspective of a person who feels incredibly unsafe, and they're being asked to stay in a relationship that feels incredibly unsafe. Not unsafe physically, but unsafe as in, are they being faithful or not? You don't know. So if that is the case, and that's genuinely the case, where your spouse feels unsafe and they're looking to you and they're saying, I need you to turn on the GPS on your phone, or we need to get Live 360, or we need to do this, that, or the other. I want you to understand something very important. This is not to control you. This is to feel safe. No one can control you. You can still, with all of that stuff being accessible, you can still go out and have an affair. Nobody can stop you from that. Your spouse has no power to stop you from that. So this isn't controlling. This is your spouse saying, I am scared to death and I am having a really hard time staying in this marriage right now. But if I knew that you had nothing to hide and you were going to be as open with me as you could possibly be, I think I can stay. But I need to know that's what you're willing to do. Are you willing to be completely open? Now, my husband was a very private man. This killed him. Because he was always very, not secretive, but just private, and his whole family was like that. They're like little squirrels. They're so like, these are my nuts and you can't look at them. And these are, and he was always like that. And so that's probably why it was so easy for him to have an affair, was because I didn't have access to anything. Our relationship now is so completely transparent. We have this Google spreadsheet that only he and I have access to. And it has every username and password for every single account, even stores we shop at online, everything. Social media, bank accounts, social security accounts, 401ks, everything. Like, we have access to everything, and we didn't do this because of the affair. We honestly did this because what if something happened to one of us, what if something, anyway, so we had our reasons, but it feels so good to know that he is not hiding a single little thing from me, and that everything is so wide open. I feel so incredibly safe. I don't check up on him because he's so incredibly transparent. I have no reason to, I just really don't. So I say all this to you as a wayward spouse, to understand that the intent behind it is not control. The intent behind it is to feel safe. And part of your role as the spouse who created an unsafe environment is to step in and try to help provide safety. And I know if you are a private person like my husband was, then this may be very challenging for you. You may be the kind of person that's like, well, I don't want you to read what I say to my sister. That's private. Okay, well, just delete it then. Delete your text messages with them or whatever. Or don't say anything to your sister on text that you wouldn't say in front of your spouse's face, I think is how I would. I would hope that we are not saying things to our spouse, about our spouse to other people that we wouldn't say in front of them to begin with. But, I digress. Same thing I would say, and I do believe it's important that both spouses are transparent. I have zero issues with my spouse having any access to any of my things. Now, I know I do have some women who are in my Facebook group they don't want their husband to see what they're posting. They don't want their husband to have access to their account because they don't want their husband getting in this private group of betrayed women. And I appreciate that. And I understand that. Maybe there could be something worked out in that situation where if he wants to see that he doesn't have your login information, but rather you sit next to him and show him. So you're there and you're making sure that you're protecting the privacy of the women in the group. That I understand. Same thing if your husband is part of a private support group for men. I think that's to be respected. Okay. Just like counseling appointments, there are some things that need to stay within the bounds of a counseling appointment and not be shared outside of that. So transparency is important because it provides safety. It provided safety for me. It continues to provide safety for me, quite frankly. I think that it could provide safety for your spouse if you're willing to do it. Instead of seeing it as your spouse being controlling, see it as your spouse begging you for safety. Your spouse is looking to you to help them feel safe. And this means that, if GPS is on and you're not where you say you are, maybe that will help hold you accountable to text them and say, hey, I stopped here first and then I'm going somewhere. Be communicative, be open, be willing to provide the safety your spouse needs. That is why we want transparency. That's why it's important to be transparent. Okay. Not so we can be obsessive compulsive and look at everything that you're doing 24/7. Nobody's got time for that. Matter of fact, what happens more times than not is the more transparent the partner, the more transparent the wayward spouse is, the less the betrayed spouse actually wants to look at it. Because if you're willing to be that transparent, then that already provides so much safety for us that we don't feel the need to spy, to look, to dig, to do all those things. Now, not in every case, but in many cases, that is how it works. So think about that. If your spouse is asking for transparency, think about that for a minute. Instead of leaning into, they're just trying to control me, lean into instead, well, I created this unsafe environment and this is one way I can help make it safer for them. So I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I think that would be a very loving and compassionate and kind thing to do. So consider it. If you guys have a marriage counselor, talk to them about it. If y'all need to set boundaries around it, again, like, maybe you're in a support group for men, or you're in maybe you're doing an online men's support group, and you have a group text and that's private and you don't want your spouse to have access to it. You guys come up with certain boundaries, because there are some exceptions and I completely understand that. So do that. But transparency is important. It really, really is. Okay. If your spouse asks for it, it's not controlling. They just want to feel safe.